Part 1. Robert Fitzooth the Elder. Prologue. London, February 1110. An icy February wind whistled around the walls of the Tower of London. Even the ravens had fluffed up their feathers, too cold and afraid to take flight. They waited for what was to come, sending only a hoarse croak from time to time across the square between the great Norman donjon and the outer wall. At the Tower Hill execution site, the executioner adjusted his block and checked the blade of his axe. No prisoner was due to be executed today, but even so, everything had to be right, because the king himself had announced his impending arrival. One of the king's bodyguards was to have his hand chopped off, as punishment for raising it against a superior. There was a drum roll as Henry I stepped out of the portal of the great hall of the White Tower, holding his young daughter Matilda by the hand. The pair descended the wooden staircase from the first floor to the inner courtyard. Henry V's emissaries had already arrived. Years earlier, the young princess had been promised to the German king as his wife, in order to strengthen the alliance between the Anglo-Norman and German empires. Now, the time had come for her to be introduced to her future husband, even though she was barely 8 years old. The Archbishop of Trier would take over her education and teach her the customs and traditions of a country over which she would one day rule as empress alongside her husband. Aware of what was to pass, Henry did not let his young daughter out of his sight. He wanted to spend the last few hours together with her so that they would be etched in his memory forever. Who knew if they would ever see each other again in this life? Besides, there was no harm in her now being witness to the unpleasant duties that a monarch had to oversee. The king did not enjoy watching punishments. He preferred to occupy himself with the finer things in life, especially studying the sciences. It was not without good reason that he was nicknamed Beauclerc, the scholar. But what had to be, and when he passed a judgment, he made sure to be present when it was carried out. Behind the king walked Hugh de Clare, a contrite expression on his face. He was in command of Henry's bodyguards and, some time ago, had himself selected and rigorously trained the young man who was now about to be mutilated. And the lad had done nothing wrong, until now. The sergeant had testified that the young man had attacked him, an unforgivable offence that was even punishable by death. No superior would tolerate such insubordination, so an example had to be made here, even if de Clare felt bitter about it. The king took a seat on an upholstered chair in the gallery next to the place of execution before reaching for Matilda to lift her onto his lap. But she resisted, making it clear that she would sooner stand next to her father. At 8 years of age, she already had a mind of her own. Her curly, reddish-blonde hair spilt out from under her bonnet, which never quite fit her properly. The curls framed a very pretty child's face, which only lost its grace when angry furrows marred her brow. But that was not such a rare occurrence. Her outbursts of anger were already feared among the servants, and, despite her youth, she was more often compared to a snarling lioness than a gentle kitten. Henry I gave a signal, and the miscreant was brought up from the dungeons. 2 strong men on either side of him gripped his arms tightly, while another walked ahead, holding the rope with which he was bound. The condemned man, however, did not make it easy for his captors to manhandle him and defended himself to the best of his ability. Everyone present quickly realized that the accused would not be meekly surrendering to his fate. The young lad was perhaps only 18 years old, and yet he was already a giant. Hugh de Clare was constantly searching for soldiers of his stature for the king's personal bodyguard. They had to be prepared to defend their ruler to the death, to be able to fight like a pack of ravenous wolves, and needed the powers of observation and reaction speed of a lynx to keep abreast of danger and ward off attacks in good time. All this had created high hopes for the future success of Robert Fitzooth, and now his hand was to be chopped off. He was to be chased out of the guardhouse and cast into the miserable life of a cripple. The blood, sweat, and tears of years of meticulous training was to be destroyed in one fell swoop. What a waste! Hugh de Clare thought to himself. Could that stupid sergeant not have kept his mouth shut? After all, there were other ways of chastising a rebellious soldier. But this malcontent had to complain to the king at the first opportunity. The captain swore to himself that one day he would get vengeance on this whiner. Robert Fitzooth didn't so much climb the steps to the executioner's block as get shoved up them by 3 lackeys. Now they forced him to his knees with brutal blows, yanking his arm forward with the rope so that his hand lay on the chopping block. The captor was still struggling desperately when a bright voice penetrated the oppressive silence. "What is happening to Robert?" inquired the little princess. "Please do not hurt him. He promised to carve me a new lion because that stupid man there broke my toy." "What are you talking about, child?" Henry frowned. "That soldier certainly will not be carving anything again unless he is left-handed."
"And who do you mean by the stupid man?"
"I mean the sergeant over there, who took my lion from me." Matilda pointed to one of the men near the scaffold. Then she rummaged in her belt pouch and pulled out several pieces of a wooden lion. She held the pieces out accusingly to her father, who scrutinized them closely. Although broken, he could still discern the artistry in the piece of work, a lion modelled on the heraldic animal that the king himself wore as an emblem across his chest. When he put the pieces together, the lion seemed to be striding along. The front paws were stretched out, and dainty claws were visible. The carver had placed the hind legs under the body, so that the animal could stand on them. Even the tail was carefully crafted and seemed to whip the air above the lion's back, just like the lion on the king's tabard. However, the tasselled piece was missing, and the toy animal was otherwise destroyed beyond repair. "Where did you get this?" asked Henry, expertly scrutinizing the work. Matilda rolled her eyes. Did not her father understand anything today? "Robert carved it when he was keeping watch over me. I said that already. Is it not beautiful? He'd nearly finished when that sergeant there came and snatched the lion away from him. Now it is broken, and I want a new one." "Why did he take it away? Because Robert neglected his watch?" Henry spoke to his daughter like an adult. He'd always done that, and it had resulted in many a stimulating conversation. "No, the sergeant said it was because we are not lions, but jackals," the little princess countered with rage in her voice. "At best, ravenous wolves. Yet our heraldic animals are leopards in Normandy and noble lions in England. It is true, is it not?" Did he really say that? Henry could not believe his ears. If only the sergeant had not underestimated the child's powers of comprehension. He wouldn't have uttered such terrible insults in her presence otherwise. "He did," Matilda said, and nodded eagerly, her curls bobbing up and down. "And when Robert tried to take the lion back from him, he would not let go of it. They wrestled each other, and it broke." At that moment, the drums began to roll. When the drums fell silent, the executioner's axe would come down and mutilate the condemned man for all time. But Henry interrupted the proceedings with an imperious wave of his hand. "Come to me, sergeant, this very minute." The king's voice resounded across the square. The summoned man hurried to the pedestal as fast as he could, falling to his knees before his ruler. "Is it true? Did you call us a dynasty of jackals?" Henry snapped at the man, who was shaking with fear. No, sire," he stuttered in panic. "Your daughter must have misunderstood. I would never dare to say anything like that." "I shall take your word for it, you wretch, that you would not dare do that if I were around." Henry was well aware that his position as King of England was by no means secure. It was his father, William the Conqueror, also known by some as William the Bastard, who had come across the Channel from Normandy and subjugated the country. And although he endeavoured to rule justly, unlike his older brother Rufus, who'd worn the crown before him, not everyone in the kingdom was well disposed towards him. Above all, the fact that his wife came from the old Anglo-Saxon royal family, and that the king treated both Normans and Englishmen equally, was resented by many who'd hoped for rich spoils here in this country. "Bring the prisoner to me," the king instructed the lackeys, who hastened to obey the order. And so the condemned man was brought down from the place of execution faster than they got him up, and a few moments later he found himself kneeling at the feet of the king, next to his sergeant. "So you carved this lion for my daughter? Tell me, where did you learn this